So today's the second day studying Romans, the letter to the Romans. Sermon title is, what's so special about the gospel? The other day I stumbled upon some picture on the internet. It says his son was dying on a bed, and he was almost unconscious before he actually passed away. And he was trying to say, he said his son was trying to say to him, his son is sick, so not him who wrote who posted the pictures. And the son was trying to say something to him, but he couldn't speak at all because of his illness. And the father gave him a pen and a paper so that he can write what he wanted to say. So he wrote, "Jesus is real." And he was smiling, even though he was not looking at anything actually in person. So the interesting thing about this picture and this post is that the comments about the pictures, and they said, if he was a Muslim, he would have seen Allah. Okay, so he was experiencing some kind of hallucination. So if he was a Buddhist, he would have seen a Buddha holding his hands. So it's just a chemical reaction, so nothing special about it. So people seem to agree with the comment, mostly. What do you think? What do you think? You never know. But the important thing about this story that I'm telling you is not whether it was Jesus or not, or Allah or Buddha. No, it's not. Do you know why the gospel is special among all? Why so? What's so special about the gospel? Paul, first of all, Romans, Paul said, look at me, like we said. I am the proof that the power of God has been working through his son, which is the gospel. And he says this today, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. So what does it mean? What does he mean? What does he mean by I am not ashamed? Is it something that we should be ashamed of? The gospel message? Well, especially Asian culture, it's more of a shame honor culture. But every culture has that. But Asian culture is more like a collective culture. You have to be, it matters too much to be honored, and it matters too much to be ashamed. So sometimes, especially in the culture of the Middle East, Muslim culture, Islam, honor takes the priority over life. So that's why some of them are willing to kill people over to keep the honor of Islam. So Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Ashamed. When do you feel ashamed? When do you feel ashamed? And today, shame, the word or concept of shame has been used in many places, but ashamed. Being ashamed is a big thing, right? Why do you do what you do now? Of course, You want to get honor, some kind of honor. You don't want to be ashamed. If you work that you're ashamed of, you're not going to be happy about it. So it's honor, shame and honor culture is deeply rooted in our lives. Okay? But Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. What about the gospel? Why is he saying that he's being ashamed? He's not being ashamed of the gospel at all. Because, like I said, the gospel set him apart from all the rest. And what does that mean? It's about status. Okay? What do you fear? We are ashamed to be what? A bigot, unintelligent, or unenlightened. So what do? Like in the situation, someone says it could be Allah or Buddha. What comes to your mind? That's right. I'm just one of them. A Christian is just a part of whole. And it doesn't address all the religions, and it's just a part of it. I have to respect all other religions. Okay? You don't want to be a bigot. Bigotry is the biggest fear of our society, American society. But what Paul says here is that I don't care. I don't fear to be seen as a bigot or unintelligent or unenlightened per se. He's not ashamed of it. Why? Because the gospel is about the power of God. It is about the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. So we're going to be looking at three things today. The gospel is the power of God, and how the power changes everything, and to whom is the power available. So the first, the gospel is the power of God. What does it mean? So, what kind of power is it? Paul says, it is the power of God for salvation. So, wooden translation of the Greek is this: the power of God is unto salvation. So it says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, and right after the gospel, the power is unto salvation to everyone who believes. So what does it matter? So it's God's power to save. It's not human power. We have to understand. So the gospel is not about a group of people having a consensus or agreement with a set of doctrines or certain beliefs. No, it's not just that. It's not simply that. It includes that. But it's not the core of the gospel. The gospel is what sets us apart from all others, and it's about the power of God. And it's God's power to save people. And we have to understand salvation, the power to save, the power for salvation. Salvation has two components. On one hand, it's already done. And on the other hand, not yet. So already, but not yet. It's a very profound truth about our salvation and life. We have to understand. Already, you're already given a righteous status, okay, before God. That is, God has done through His Son once for all. And at the end of the day, and end of the world, on the judgment day, God will surely save you from the judgment. That is already done. Okay, you can add to it, you cannot add to it, or you cannot subtract anything from it. It's God's work. Salvation is God's work. That is the gospel. But don't forget, we are not supposed to forget about not yet. But we know that. But how does it affect our lives? Okay? Today. On Sunday. So not yet. God makes things right with you in your life. Until the last day of your life. God is working to make things right before Him in your life. That's not yet part. That's the not yet part. And the power of the gospel is the power of righteousness. Okay? The righteousness. How the power of righteousness changes everything then. The second point. It says, for in it, it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. So, for in it. So when you think about righteousness, what comes to your mind? Being right, right? Being right. When do you feel righteous? When does the righteous matter so much to you? When you have a fight with your friends or spouse, the person right next to you. You have to be right, right? I'm right, you're wrong. That's why we constantly argue and fight over really such as trivial things. Right? I am right. It's as if it matters so much, right? So the power of righteousness is very powerfully working in our lives. The power of it being right is very, very important. Even though you are persecuted, sometimes it's better to risk your life to be right, to be in the right. But what about the righteousness of God? What I just said about righteousness is a general understanding about righteousness. Everyone in this room, also in the world, would agree upon this statement. But what about the righteousness of God? For in it, in what? In the gospel. What is the righteousness is Paul talking about that sets apart from all others? And we're supposed to live by the power of the righteousness in the gospel. It looks quite different from a general understanding of righteousness. It's called alien righteousness. It is not the righteousness of the aliens of the universe, of course not. But it's about the righteousness that is alien to you. It's not from you. You can't generate righteousness within you. We really have to understand this. It is not your righteousness, but God's righteousness, where the power comes from. God has taken the initiative in redeeming the undeserved sinners, and also He accomplished it. God has not abandoned the sinners. So here's the thing, huge difference between the general understanding of righteousness and the righteousness of God in the gospel is that God Himself sent His own Son to give favor to the undeserved sinners. That's the righteousness we're talking about here. They're quite different. Do you think it's righteous for God to do that? Punishing someone who doesn't deserve punishment for someone who deserves punishment. Is it right? Is it righteous? Or is it just for God to do that? But we understand God is just. This is profound truth that you have to understand, you have to think about every day. God has saved the sinners by serving them, by providing for them, by being patient with them, by dying for them. And in doing so, God has revealed His righteousness. And that's His righteousness, a totally different understanding of righteousness. And this is the way and the power in and through which God makes things right in your life. And Paul calls it the righteousness of God. What does it do? It changes your inner self first. The power of righteousness, understanding this. And you should have confidence that God will make things right through your sacrifice. Not through your strength, not through your intelligence, not just through your honesty, not just your piety, which means your faithfulness. Not through those, but through your sacrifice. Because the righteousness of the gospel means God's sacrifice for undeserved sinners. God took it as righteousness. That's God's righteousness. And He has the power. It has the power. And when you say, I believe in Jesus Christ, and I'm just not talking about, I agree with a set of doctrines, or what the Bible teaches, of course it includes that, right? But it's not simply that. You are living by the power of God, which means you're living with the power of righteousness, which means you're living with the power of your sacrifice. God uses your sacrifice to make things right in your life. The righteousness of God is revealed. Present tense is used, which means it's not just a past event that happened before, way before. It happened someday before. It is happening right now, and God is up to revealing His righteousness. What is the righteousness? Making things right through sacrifice. That is God's righteousness. And God is up to that job. He is revealing His righteous power, the power of righteousness, the power of sacrifice for undeserved sinners. How do you apply this in our lives? Think about people around you in your life. There are some people who don't deserve your favor, of course, who don't deserve your kindness, even just the random people on the street. But God reveals His righteousness through you, through your sacrifice, and He makes things right. And He heals broken relationships, and He heals brokenness in you. There's lots to talk about. And notice that this leads to the third point. To whom is the power available? It says to everyone who believes. Everyone who believes, yes. Everyone who believes. No matter who you are, it doesn't really matter to God. Everyone who believes. What is believing that? What is believing? Is believing work? Oh, that person is faithful. He has a strong faith. She has really commendable faith. Is that work? But we're told that we're saved not by work, but by faith alone. And also, the righteous shall live by faith, not work. But what about faith? Believing? Is believing a work? No, of course not. Believing is not something we do in the sense of works, but always a response. Believing is a response. Response to what? Response to God. God's work. And Calvin says this: faith is a kind of vessel which we come empty and with the mouth of our soul open to seek God's grace. Believing then, while a genuinely human activity, possesses no merit or worth, for which God is somehow bound to reward us. For salvation is, from first to last, God's work. So when you say, I believe, there's no value in faith. Believing doesn't mean anything. What matters is, who do you believe in? So it's not about, like I said, faith is not agreement with a set of doctrines. But it is a trust in a person. Trust in a person who died for you and resurrected on behalf of you. Faith is the only response to your situation through which God reveals His goodness and righteousness. So that's why he says, from faith to faith. So you start, you're saved through faith, and you finish with faith. Believing in the good news is that you're willing to sacrifice for the person right next to you, even if he or she doesn't deserve it. And you need the power of God to do that. You need to trust that God will use your sacrifice to make things right. To make your brokenness, his or her brokenness, or weaknesses, right, and heal broken relationships. God uses your faith, which is your sacrifice, for your people.